This is a theory I developed now after many sleepless hours, a bunch of cola and cigarettes to help with that. So again, this is a theory. I don't really believe it myself, but it's an interesting idea to play with. We know how the God Emperor of mankind is a god. There's no denying it at this point. That thing is true. The ecclesiarchy was right, as much as the Space Marines might hate it. Some of the Space Marines might hate it. But initially, the Emperor had a different path in life. Let's remember, the Emperor is a perpetual. That's where Vulcan got it. He was there. He lived through centuries of human development and destruction and then brought it all together. But I think this kind of messes up a little bit. You see, one of the most accepted theories right now, and until we get the Death and the End, Volume 2, is that the Emperor is the collective souls of a bunch of shamans that yeeted themselves to stop the forces of chaos. All good and nice, it's a nice theory and probably a good one that we have. We don't know for sure what's the Emperor. But we do know that he is a perpetual, and because of that, doesn't really die. Now let's go look at the Olennius Pius's story, where he helps the Emperor take down the Tower of Babel. Well, take down is a bad way of saying it. They make an army and they fight towards the Tower of Babel, and then the Emperor wants to use the powers of chaos for himself, of which, of course, Olennius Pius disagrees with that idea wholeheartedly, and he strikes the Emperor down before leaving. That is, if I remember the last part right. Nevertheless, the last part doesn't really matter. What's important is that there is this connection with the forces of chaos since a long time ago for the Emperor. Good. Now let's look at a little bit of different books and stories and piece things together. First, we know that the first demon prince of chaos was Be'lakor in both Warhammer Fantasy and in Warhammer 40k. This might not seem important, but it is the concept of an undivided chaos demon prince that we need to keep in mind for now. Let's move on a little. We go to the Horus Heresy, where we have that book where I think was the Vengeful Spirit book, where Horus gets on Moloch and then to the pool of something and lives a bunch of lives, a bunch of time, becomes a warlord, a king, a conqueror, a sorcerer, everything. And then he comes back imbued by the powers of chaos. Good. We also have that in mind. And we're going to combine everything at this point at some point. But let's look at a little different thing. Souls usually can get destroyed. Horus' soul got destroyed on his own ship, the Vengeful Spirit. In what matter or way, we're still waiting for the end and the death, I guess. Yeah, Volume 2. But we do know that his soul was rendered apart by the Emperor after he struck down Sanguinius. Good. Keep that in mind. In the Black Legion series, you remember that Horus had this whole clone of his made by Fabius Bile that started butchering the other Black Legionnaires. But once he saw Abaddon, a part of himself came to his senses. And that's very interesting because technically souls are gone. Once you destroy a soul, you can no longer really create a perfect clone of it. That's why Clone Fulgrim still works as a concept, because at this point, Fulgrim's original soul is missing, should we say, and his demon Primarch body is inhabited by, I guess, another demonic entity. This is speculation and things that I'm trying to piece together from what I remember. Okay. So we know that souls don't really go out forever. And I guess the Emperor is a very good way of showing things because look at him. He's a literal god in 40k at this point. There is no doubt about that. But how do we reach this point from perpetual to god? There must be an intermission there. And here's where everything gathers together. You know how Archiphan, this demigod of chaos, from the Arcs of Omen books, is exactly that, a demigod of chaos. Close to godhood, but not right there. He deals in machine spirits and stuff like that. Good. Now, everything I've mentioned until now doesn't make sense. It's just a collection of random facts and lore and books that don't really give us anything to this theory. But now we're going to piece things together. We know demon princes of chaos undivided exist. We know the emperors are perpetual. He has a bunch of time. We know there's basically a pool in Moloch that kind of gives you access to the demon realm, and you can live through it and stuff. We know that the Emperor has been painted in The End and the Death as this more like Promethean figure that stole fire from the gods and brought it to humanity. And here's where things are going to become interesting. I propose that the Emperor is, or was, a demon prince of chaos undivided. Now I make this simple notion because Horus goes into the pool, into the whole realm of demons, and becomes exactly a sort of demon prince of chaos undivided. He becomes very imbued with the powers of the warp in such a way that I don't think it's wrong to call him that. It might be wrong, but I don't think it is. The Emperor has a connection to that thing in Moloch, and thus it makes sense that the Emperor used it to get his power from the Chaos Gods. It's very implied in certain points, as I said, the Promethean figure, that he's done that. He took power from the Chaos Gods and is willingly using it against them. Now, of course, it might be in the imbued form that Horus was in, but I propose that, would that be your first thing? When a perpetual, which is basically an eternal enemy of chaos, comes to you and wants to subjugate himself, to get part of that power, are you just going to put power into him? Or are you going to give him the highest rank, especially a perpetual that kind of prove a thorn in your side? Remember, agents that fight against chaos have the chances of becoming the biggest champions of chaos. That is mentioned with the one fallen sister of battle, inquisitors that have fallen before, and so on. And here's where it gets interesting. I think that the moment the Emperor came to them, to the gods of chaos, and presented himself as this being, as he wanted power to them, they granted him the same boon that they granted Belacor before him, and made him a demon prince of chaos undivided. But here's an interesting thing, and here's where the lack of knowledge really affects us in a way. Because we don't know what Archiphane went through to become a demigod of chaos, or I really don't know at this point. But it's not out there to say that the Emperor could have subjugated and worked his way to get to that rank. Another theory that I have, and another example that I have in why the Emperor became a demon prince of chaos, with his own soul, by the way, let's make that clear, is look at Horus in The End and the Death, Volume 1. Horus is losing his mind. He's thinking of Sejanus, who was dead since before the Horus Rising books started. He is just going through an episode where he sees dead comrades, where he mocks the Emperor, mentioning that he was Alexander the Great and so on. He is losing his mind. And this is why I think the Emperor didn't get imbued with the power of chaos. Because there is no sense to it. The Emperor would have been too mad to even go through the whole process of creating the Space Marines, the Thunder Warriors, the Custodes, to reuniting humanity and bringing them to a gold age. If the Emperor was imbued with the powers of chaos like Horus, they wouldn't have gone as mad. And there is also an interesting note in The End and the Death, is the fact that if they don't do something quick, a fifth chaos god might appear in the universe. And that spells out a bunch of troubles. Now this is, of course, implied to be Horus. And if Horus wins, that's the fifth chaos god being born, and the death of humanity and the Imperium. I was about to say Empire, but that's an interesting note. Whatever. And the death of the Imperium. Now, again, this theory doesn't really hold Because if the Emperor becomes a demon prince of chaos, undivided, with his own soul and everything, then how does he turn against them? Because even when Be'lakor works against the wishes of the of the chaos gods, it doesn't go in his favor because the chaos gods are stronger, which makes me to think of the following situation. Since the Emperor is a perpetual, and not a being created from all the powers of the four chaos gods, I think that's a point that helped the Emperor to maintain his stability, his senses, and his desire to unite humanity. And it would make sense in a way. How can you take fire from the chaos gods? Now, Prometheus' story is a simple one. He brought the fire from Mount Olympus to the people on Earth and enlightened them. His story is simple. He just took it and gave it to humans. No problem there. How did the Emperor do that? The knowledge to create the Thunder Warriors and everything else he already has. It came from brilliant minds and scientists and everything. But somehow he needed the strength to be able to rule everything that he created, to maintain control over everything he created. And technology works until a point, as the old ones have proven us in in Warhammer Fantasy. It works until a point, until magic gets involved. And you need magic to keep magic at bay. I think he became a demon prince of chaos and then used the powers he was granted to try and suppress the chaos gods themselves, or in a way act against them. And that would make sense. I think thanks to his perpetuality and, just plot armor, the Emperor became a demigod of chaos. Something not strong enough to outright oppose the chaos gods, but something strong enough to be a threat to them. Which is again proven through all their methods of trying to mess with him. From the chaos gods corrupting Erda, which shouldn't be a character, and killing her is the only good thing that Erebus ever did, besides the point. From messing with Erda to send the Primarchs to different planets, to the point where they corrupted his sons and turned them against him. Except Angron, who is a special case. You wouldn't work with this if it was just somebody just imbued with power. In Horus's case, they probably acted different out of the same fear. For example, turn him into a demon prince like you did with the Emperor, and you grant him a little bit too much power. But then again, grant him enough power, you might make him mad without granting him the demon prince abilities and stuff. And because of that, I think that's why they kept Horus imbued and why Horus is losing his mind on the Vengeful Spirit. Though the Vengeful Spirit seems to be now an entity of the warp in itself, which is a different discussion. And because of that, I think the Emperor went from these stages: normal perpetual human, demon prince, demigod of chaos, and that's where we I think, get him during the Horus Heresy, where he is kind of a demigod of chaos with immense psychic potential. This theory could also work if you consider the whole shamans eating themselves and becoming one entity, because that's a pretty strong entity that, even if he becomes the demon prince of chaos, doesn't need to become a demigod of chaos. Anyway, let's go back. After we're done with the demigod phase of his emperor moment, when the Horus Heresy, he gets imbued in the golden throne, and thanks to all the sacrifices in his name and prayers, he becomes a true god of chaos. Which, if I am not mistaken, that's the whole plan that Archiphane has, to become a full-fledged god of chaos. Abaddon doesn't really care because he doesn't serve any of them. What's the point? He doesn't want to accept one because he knows his fate is doomed the moment he does that. I think this is the progression for the Emperor. And some things line up. For example, the possibility of demon princes of chaos exists. We know the whole Moloch deal. We know that the Emperor is this Promethean figure who stole the powers of the Chaos Gods and he wants to use them against them, and that's why they're mad and trying to corrupt everything around him. And in a way, it makes sense. Now, of course, the most logical thing is that the Emperor was a perpetual, very strong psyker that decided to use the powers of chaos and kind of went through the same process as Horus, but without losing his mind because he was stronger psychically than Horus, and because of that, he didn't lose his mind and was able to become the God Emperor of mankind in the process. And I think that's really how it goes. It's not gonna be this theory of, oh, he was a demon prince of chaos and then he became a demigod of chaos, or he was just a demon prince of chaos, a very strong one at that, and then he just chose to and then he just chose to make the Astartes and Primarchs and everything, and Chaos screwed him over. By the way, which kind of makes it a little bit funny because the Chaos Gods really screw Be'lakor over, especially in the End Times books. No, not the End Times books. It's the what was it again? Archeon. Yeah, I think it's the Archeon story where he's promised to be the harbinger of the end times, Be'lakor, and then he has to bow to Archeon. And then it's funny because they don't really do anything with Be'lakor after that. It's like this demon prince wanted to become the supreme bringer of the apocalypse for the Chaos Gods, and then he just serves this random human that the Chaos Gods apparently like in a way. And then it's never really brought up again. It might be in the Age of Sigmar, but I don't really care much about that. So yes, demon princes of chaos undivided can be screwed over by all the chaos gods or one in particular. And because of that, I think it kind of makes this theory work a little with the chaos gods messing up with the emperor and his plans and ideals and everything he wants to use against them. It's also in the serve preservation thing. Another interesting aspect brought into us, I guess, in the Death and the End, or The End and the Death, Volume 1, is that whole mention that the Emperor made Chaos work against their own interests, which in a way is how you destroy Chaos. You make them work against their own very nature and their own interests, then you kind of screw them over. Because Korn no longer goes with blood for the blood god and Korn cares not for where the blood flows and skulls for the skull throne. You kind of make him more cautious, and even while he wants to throw enemies out there for the blood, he knows that there's a bigger target and he needs to reserve his armies, which might not have the same bloodlust when it comes to the big fight. Same with Nurgle and Slanesh and Tzeentch. When they work against their own natures, that is when the Chaos Gods are said to be at their weakest. Which makes sense because the Emperor somehow managed to unite them all against him. Now, that might be a case of Demon Princehood screwing with the Masters, or it might just be the Emperor being a very strong psyker. As I said before, of course, the main thing that I think they will go with, and I think they will do everything with, is the Emperor just being a strong psyker and just stealing all their powers from Chaos to become the God Emperor of mankind. But it's still an interesting theory to put it out there, that the Emperor of mankind was once Demon Prince of Chaos, and that's how he made the Astartes, the Primarchs, and everything, because he had all this power and knowledge and used it alongside the brightest minds he could find on Terra. It's interesting, I know, it's as good as nothing, but still, it's fun. And there are some interesting aspects that give this theory some sense. I'm sure there are a bunch of aspects, book extracts, parts from the White Dwarf, and everything else that weigh heavy in the contradiction side. Because at the end of the day, it's just a theory I came up with, and I don't even think it's original. But anyway, what can I do? This is just my ramblings at a late hour in the night. I hope you enjoyed this. I probably did or didn't. I'll see tomorrow. And I'll see you in the next one.